welcome to today's episode of the Dive Into Reiki podcast. My guest today is Veronique Frede. She's based in Chicago and is a certified Reiki teacher practitioner in the Japanese style. She's originally from France, but has been studying and practicing Reiki in various parts of the world and settings since 2008. Aside from her private practice, Veronique has worked and volunteered in a hospital, a cancer wellness center, yoga studios, a senior living community, among other places. She became a Reiki teacher at the Japanese Culture Center in Chicago in 2019, offering her the opportunity to deepen her understanding of the Japanese arts and ways, including Zen. She's also graduated from the Mindfulness Meditation Teacher Certification Program led by Tara Brach and Jack Kornfield. Before we move on to the wonderful interview with Veronique, I just wanted to invite you to visit my Patreon, patreon.com/dive into Reiki. And there you can help support this podcast and help me with the cost of editing, hosting, the Zoom, all those things that add up and make possible for you to listen to this beautiful content and hear the stories of these beautiful Reiki masters. You can also find their levels of subscriptions for monthly practices and Q&As. So again, that is patreon.com/dive into Reiki, or shoot me an email or a DM on Instagram. Without further ado, on to the interview. Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Dive into Reiki podcast with my guest, Veronique. And I'm going to let her say hi. How are you?
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Very grateful.
Perfect. So I start every interview the same way. I love to hear how people came into contact with Reiki. And in your case, you also have a family tradition that is quite interesting and unique. So we'd love for you to share that.
Yes, thank you. It's a bit of a long story, so I hope.
We have all the time in the world.
Okay, so I think it all started when I was a teenager, in fact, and how I came to Reiki was really a need to find a way to take care of myself. I think that's probably a simple way to put it. When I was a teenager, I experienced a serious illness that affected my sight. And each time, from the age of like 14 to the age of 20 plus, I had a few recurrences. And I was living in Paris when I was in the early 20s, when one of my friends suggested that I should try meditation practice. And at that time I thought, yes, why not? And which I did. And so I joined a meditation group and we were meeting regularly and I started to practice meditation regularly. And that's when I became more aware of that mind-body connection. In fact, I started to find clarity into how our thoughts, emotions, and our, affect our physicality and the other way around. Realizing how each time I had one of those recurrences of that illness, each time it was related with a very intense, stress or anxiety in my life. And then I thought, wow, I need to kind of more, to look into this. And the way what became clear to me was to really become more aware when those episodes of anxiety and stress were coming in through my body, to be able to really pause and take some deep breath, or to be able to respond to that. And there were different ways that I was able to, take a walk, or at that time I didn't know anything about Reiki, so I was not really doing my hands-on healing. But it became clear to me that I had to pause and, I take care and tend to it. And at that time, I didn't know much about mindfulness, but I guess, that's what basically it is. And the type of practice that I was doing in Paris was a mix of like guided meditation, chanting. I didn't know much about, meditation practice. I was just like, okay, I need to sit on the cushion,
Yeah.
and see what happens, So I was really glad to find that clarity. It's been very helpful. And I have to say that it's been, I touch wood, but more than 30 years. And, so far, no recurrence. So I guess there's something there to know.
That's
And
great.
then, so that was kind of my first episode to encounter that practice. Then I met my husband in Asia while traveling. That was another chapter, I would say, in my life. And I was so excited, that this a whole new world was opening in front of me with like new flavors, new ways of, thinking, new ways of living life, new sense, so we traveled a lot across Asia for a few years. And I guess that's when my meditation became, the world became my meditation cushion. I like to put it that way, because my attention shifted a little bit from really formal practice to more, opening to the world kind of approach. And it was wonderful, very exciting. And we had 2 children, and while we were in Asia, and then one of our child needed a lot of therapy. So that's when we decided to move from Asia, from where we were, where therapy was a little hard to access, and to move to the US and in Chicago, where we landed and where we actually live now.
It's an
And
interesting city. Yes.
yeah, it's a great city. I love Chicago. Then my son, when he was 9, started to experience a lot of stress and anxiety at school. And, and I started to feel the same. So one weekend, I'm like, okay, I'm in bed feeling really depressed, very anxious, very worried, very angry. And I thought, what's with this? And then the second day I started to again remember those days when I was in Paris, engaged in formal meditation practice, and how I was able to find some peace, through the difficult times at that time. So I thought, what, I need to go back to meditation practice. And then I Googled and find my meditation teacher here who was teaching Reiki the following year. So that's came to the practice of Reiki through meditation, basically. And started to practice Reiki. So myself started to practice Reiki with my son. And it was quite interesting, to see how this practice became helpful, especially for my son, who had some trouble sleeping at night. So then I started to do my Reiki level 1, Reiki level 2, completed my Reiki level 3 in 2012. And at that time, my teacher was opening a healing center at her studio. And she asked a few of her students if we were interested to practice there. And my first reaction was, I'm not quite sure. That's not my profession. But she put it so simply. She said, hey, Veronique, if we have a client, maybe we can contact you. And if you're available, maybe you can come. And I thought, yeah, I think I can do that. So that's how I started to practice Reiki professionally. And at that time in 2012, I've been going back to France, where I'm from, every summer with my children to visit my family. And so at that time, I told my mom, it's like, hey, I'm a Reiki master.
We get so excited with the first Reiki master certificate, right? And then we realize, like, yeah, there is still a lot to go.
Exactly. And so she was like, oh, what is Reiki? And I said, well, I can share a little bit about it. And then at that time, so that's where my heritage comes in. So my family practice, I don't know, it's a traditional way of healing using prayers in France. And that addresses certain things. And in my family, the type of practice we do seems to help with burning sensations or shingles. And it's what we call, and I didn't know anything about it much at that time because I grew up with my mom, my aunt, my grandmother practicing this. And they were not professional, they were having their own jobs during the day. And when people had certain needs, they were, they knew who to go for, and were coming in the evening and during the weekend, and to meet my relatives, to receive some healing and relief. So in 2012, that summer, my mom, thought, okay, maybe if you're interested in this type of work, maybe it's time for us to share with you our tradition. So both my aunt and my mom kind of, passed on those prayers to me. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. But they gave me some instructions. So what is it? And then I looked into it. This type of practice seems to be very popular in Europe, especially in Germany, in Switzerland, and in France, especially in the countryside, where I guess access to healthcare was more limited, kind of the old days.
Yeah.
And people had to find ways to, I don't know, take care of themselves. And that's how I can explain it. And so those prayers are very interesting because they seem to be very specific at addressing, specific things. And so when so the people, the group of people, they're called like fire cutters, or faiseurs de secret in French, which is coupeurs de feu in French. I'm not quite sure in English how they are called. But the region where I'm coming from has a lot. Now there are a few, but they had a lot of healers. And when I grew up, and whenever we had some kind of skin issues like allergies or warts or things like that, we knew who to go to, and we were not going to a dermatologist, which probably we should, and because healthcare is important. And but we were going to see such and such, and checking in for 10 minutes or 5 minutes, and then that was it. And then the symptoms, they were doing their work, and then symptoms slowly disappeared. So when my mom and my aunt so passed on those prayers, for a few years I was not really practicing with them because I was not quite sure. And generally speaking, it's something we were not promoting. It's just by word of mouth and who and people, who know you. And, that's how we worked. And it was not a profession again. We were not receiving money. They were sometimes receiving bread or cakes or even wine,
Right, it's good. Yeah.
as an exchange. That's right. But it was very, very simple, very. So when I received them, I was like, okay, my mom told me, if you have people around you are in need, then maybe you can offer that. And 2012, so I started to practice Reiki at the studio. And so for a few years, I was not really, I didn't have any opportunities to do so. And all of a sudden, I had people around me who I started to hear about, okay, there's a very difficult case of shingles. And then someone referred me. And so the first time I practiced, I thought, I don't need to see that person. So until then, my family was seeing people in person. It was in our little town, where everybody knew everybody. And so people were popping in. And I thought, after having had, I think, experience with Reiki distance healing, I thought, I'm very comfortable just doing it just by using a picture. And so I emailed the person sent me a picture. And so the instruction, right, from my mom was just, you sit somewhere and then you really have the picture of this person, or you really kind of connect with that person. And then you just recite those prayers. That's it, for 3 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it's not like 24 hours. It's just a kind of it takes about 20 minutes, half an hour. And so the practice is just to recite those prayers. And those prayers come from the Christian tradition. So it's nothing like, woohoo. And but that's it. It's very simple. There's no need to visualize anything, to do anything. So it's very much like, Enkaku Ryoho, the way that we learn it from France. It's just you sit, you really be with, feel that connection, be kind of one with that person, and then you just practice. And it, that first time, it seems that it was helpful. And again, it's just, just recite. That's it. It's like we don't control anything. It's just whatever, we just recite. And I love that, because it's like just practice. That's it.
And
And then you just, let the process go.
for me, when you send me that article and it talk about how every family like inherits a formula, and
Yeah.
then I remember a conversation with Justin Stein, who's the historian about Reiki, and he kept telling me that Mikao Usui was going through the sutras looking for a formula to heal. And when I think a lot of his probably 21-day meditation was reciting sutras, because 21 days without water or food, you better have some sutras or mantras to repeat. And what you're telling me, completely opposite side of the world, but pretty much the same, right? We recite, we're in a space of light and love, and we let go. So it felt very, I like that when I saw the formula, like it felt like at the same, again, everything goes to the same place, right? A place of practice and opening our heart.
Totally. And letting go.
Yeah, and letting go.
And I think that's one of the most, challenging thing to do. And I have a little story in addition to that, because so when I started to practice with those prayers, of course, I was like, okay, how, and really observing, how the workings of it, trying to understand. So at some point, I had more cases. And of course, the Western mind thinking, okay, my mom told me 3 days, but maybe if I go longer, it's going to be even better, even more powerful. And so I tried. And it was very interesting, because the first time, went on for 6 days, got sick, had a flu, interestingly.
Oh, you had or the person had?
No, I did. I
Oh
did.
no.
Yeah. So initially I was okay, just a flu, it's just what it is. And then I carried on with, and each time I was going for more than 3 days, I started to experience a flu type of thing, right? So feeling tired or, sick, and like a flu. And nothing major, but I could notice, okay. So, and then I told my mom, it's like, well, this is interesting. If you go for more than 3 days, it seems that somehow, somewhere, as a practitioner, our life force may be affected. Although I don't think that I'm giving my life force. It really feels like, something moving through. But, and my mom looked at me, it's like, Veronique, I told you, 3 days, no more. And so that's when it's like, okay, I have to really stick to and stay within that practice and that method, not trying to change anything, and trusting that, it's not me doing anything in any case. It's just sit, recite for 3 days, and that's it. And so that was very interesting to see that. And I also try to work with it on other things. Then it seems that it's quite helpful with shingles. So I
Yeah.
thought I can use it for other things. But
Now you know who to call if I get shingles. You know that.
all right. Oh, I didn't know that. No.
Yeah.
Anyway,
You're gonna have a bunch of us calling you like, hey.
right. Yeah. And so it's interesting how it's specific, and I think it has to do with maybe the vibrations when
Yeah.
we recite in a certain vibration that somehow, somewhere connects with the vibrations of the illness. I don't know. But
That and also the mindset, right? If they've told you this is for shingles and burns,
yeah,
even though you say, let me try, there is a part of you in your head. It's like, this is for shingle and burns. So it's interesting.
I don't know. But now I know that is you sit, you recite 3 days. That's it.
And there is something beautiful. And I do think, like, again, I remember I had an interview once and said there are two types of people, the lineage bearer, the tradition bearers, and then the people who innovate and do stuff, right? Because we, at the end, their traditions are like 100 years old. We need to adapt them to the world. But there is something interesting about how when we begin a practice, right? And we think we can do it better, improve better, and we forget this has been done for hundreds of years one way for a reason. So I think whenever we're ready to change a practice, we should have practiced quite a few years to then perhaps say, hey, I've been practicing this for 10, 15 years. I'm going to do this modification based on experience versus I'm going to make it stronger, better so easily, right? And that's our first, because that's how we are. This is not a critic about anyone. This is how we are as humans. We're always gonna go there. In my case, it was like they told me, do not meditate with the Reiki master symbol more than a few minutes. You're not grounded enough to hold it yet. I'm like, yeah. I did a like hour and it was a mess. But
Yeah.
yeah, like we always want to push things. And but interesting is also interesting because when we push, we realize, okay, you know, it's actually right to go to 3 days or just meditate a few minutes until your grounding is better to hold that energy. So thank you for sharing that.
Most welcome. It's those little lessons that we learn through life.
Yeah, but also what I like is then like literally your family is very open. You come from a tradition who's open for this kind of healing. I come from a tradition where like literally my mom still calls it witchcraft, or I'm actually like ripping people off with a placebo effect every session. And in my head it's like, well, if it's placebo but works, who cares, right? So how did that meditation background and having that family openness to it, because I'm sure a lot of people who hear this podcast, like half of them, their family are like in my camp, perhaps hopefully half will be in your camp. How did that affect your Reiki practice? You think that help you have a different approach, perhaps a more mindful, more oriented to daily practice? How was that?
Yeah, certainly uh, so the tradition of my family has really informed my distance healing kind of approach
Yeah,
in many ways, because I was really surprised or to use the approach of France, with this, and it's totally consistent,
yeah,
and it seems to be helpful.
yeah.
So
Sorry, I'm just gonna clarify. You after train with your teacher, you train when you refer Francis to Francine, who yeah,
yes, that's right, my teacher.
yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, that was interesting, to have that insights. Like, okay, yeah, I'm very comfortable with that. It's helpful. The mind body connection, through my own experience with this illness, definitely brought me to understand better about mindfulness, which I had no clue about. And the Reiki precepts, to be present, with what is here, to be more in touch with our emotions, our thoughts, and our body, and how our health can be affected, by or our well-being, in life, because it's not just our health. When when we get angry, yes, it can affect, we can't speak, it just, we don't breathe properly, we don't see clearly, but it also affects people around us. And I recall that my boyfriend at that time, who is now my husband, felt really, when I was angry, and I was angry at times, he could really feel it and not knowing what to do with it. And some point he told me, he's like, well, I don't know what to do with it. And it's like, well, I love this guy, I don't want to affect him because I'm angry. And when I'm angry, I can be angry for days. So I started to look more deeply into this. So for me, it's my life that has been informing my practice, and my practice has been informing also my life. It's not something I see as I'm a professional and not a professional. I think I had no intention to teach professionally or to become a teacher, even less so, or even professional practice. It's like, no, it's not my thing. I this is something that is a tool for me in my life and for those around me. I was not comfortable with the idea of teaching or even being out into the world and practicing with others, but it just happened. And then then I felt more comfortable. Then that's part of some work that I had to do.
I never imagined I will be interviewing people on a podcast myself. So we end up in, wherever like Reiki takes us, like how
Yeah,
Takata
exactly.
would say, let Reiki guide you. So we end up in different, and for the people listening or watching this podcast, we actually, you and I met in, I think it's 2016, if I'm
Yeah,
not wrong, when we did together a Shimpin and a Reiki tree training, because we're serial trainers. Uh, but I wanted, there is something I love and about what you're saying, right? We need to have an embodied practice. I think a lot of times we use Reiki to feel something, wonderful things, and almost to escape life versus having life informing our practice and feel those emotions, right? Something like I want to cleanse negative emotions without feeling them. I want to release them, but actually the difference is about that word that you use, recognizing that beautiful, So can you talk a little bit about that?
yeah. I think emotions is what makes us human, right? So it's really important to honor them, recognize them, and learn how to be with them. I think that's really the key. Um, it's not about not being angry. It's not about not being worried. We need, to anger. We need worries. We need, but to a certain point, and that's where it comes to. Because when we are more in touch with, those emotions through the body, how they feel in our body, where they live in our body, then quickly we become more aware of them and able um, to pause, to and to have a choice. How to be with this, right? I can go and be hijacked and kind of be totally angry, or I can take a walk and try to tend to that surge of energy and find clarity into the situation, gain some perspective to know how to respond to that situation that made me angry. So I think the practice helps us to gain that freedom and of choice. And there's a lot of freedom in that, and I think the practice of Reiki, and to me, hands-on healing, is a way as well to be more in touch with what is present in our life, of course, but also within us. And because there's a really like a relationship, our life affects us, and we respond to life as well. There's that kind of relationship. So I think practicing this type of, I mean, for me, it's been working because, clearly it's been helpful in my life, whether with illness or whether with well-being or relationship with people or with myself. But it really brings clarity. and perspective. And I think it helps us to feel more relaxed, bring that spaciousness and that freedom of choice in every moment.
Yeah, and when we're having our pre-interview, you mentioned something that I found lovely, right? That is not, you don't use Reiki to fix things, because some things we cannot even fix, to be honest, but to accept things as they are, or people as they are, right? And I found that very beautiful. And I wanted, if you could talk about an example, a couple of examples in your life, because it sounds very easy. Like, don't try to fix it, accept things as they are. Like, I could post it on Instagram, sounds great. Applying that is quite hard.
Yeah, because there's a lot of things that we don't like in life, that we don't want,
Yeah.
but it's there. So, the key is like, okay, it's here, I see it, it's here. So how can I be with it, in a way that I can be okay, and I think that's again what practice, is very helpful to bring that clarity, and then ultimately feel more relaxed, and find some peace, even if it's not ideal, and find ways, through life. I think we talked about harmony, that term,
Yeah.
during our first meeting, and it's a very interesting idea that is very fundamental in Japanese culture and East Asian also philosophy in general. I had a lot of challenge with that term because initially I thought harmony was just becoming more like alike, and the same. And then I realized, no, harmony is really to trying to find ways to be okay with one another, and while still being who we are, in that big bright light, but also with our own unique ways of being in life, our unique ways of thinking, of being, and I think practice really helps us with building that capacity to be with everything, and know how to respond. And I think that has to do with compassion.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that capacity to stand, to hold, and with a sense of care, a sense of compassion, a sense of kindness, and respond. It's very active, compassion. It's it really calls for action and response, and that response can be do nothing, but that response can be also, informed by the insight that we may gain, in practice when our mind finally calms and we're able to gain that perspective, and then we know how to respond in a way that is kind for everyone and to be in harmony. Yeah.
And it's beautiful because it's almost like emotion is like all these crazy things floating around, right? So practice allows us to settle, to have all that settle, and then, as you say, have clarity. And the other thing we're talking that I love was hope, even though compassion is the last of the Reiki precept, and I say last with quote marks, it is also a foundation, right? Like, we cannot see our compassion nature when we're angry and worried, but also we cannot let go of anger and worry if we don't have compassion, no judgment, and all that energy as well.
Yeah, it allows us to live and experience anger. It's fantastic to be angry. It's a wonderful energy. Yeah. But at the same time, it can hijack us like any emotion. So it's really cultivating that, how to be with it. Because anger, calls for action as well. But if we're hijacked with anger, it's hard to see how to best respond in a constructive way, in a kind way that is not or less that is less harmful for ourselves and also for everybody else.
And also, like, it's funny how compassion you need it, right? Sometimes, so I've been very ADHD the last 3-4 weeks. Like, I may have to move out of the house. I still don't know where. And my brain, like, even though I'm apparently calming and I'm practicing, there is a part of my brain that is like, "Ah," and I'm forgetting to do things. And that's how my way reacts. And then I get angry. And then I get angry because I get angry, right? So it's a whole thing versus like, you know, be compassionate. You send the wrong email, you text the wrong person. Like, it's okay. First of all, it's no big deal, but also like, acceptance, this is who you are under stress, and yes, you wish you were not like this, and you can slow down, try to slow down, but you're still gonna do one or two mistakes because that's your brain react. Some people watch TV for hours, some people go running, your brain goes crazy, ADHD. And yes, you can try to be careful, but you cannot, like, this expectation of being perfect under stress is insane. So that without compassion and acceptance is very hard to function, because then I get angry that I got angry that I got angry, and what started as a pebble is a big boulder, and then I cannot function, right? So I
Yeah.
think it's very interesting knowing who we are, as you said, the clarity, but that compassion to be able to settle the mind and do that healing.
Have less reactivity, less judgment, you know.
Yes, yes. But I think usually we're the opposite, right? We're very reactive and we need to fix this. We have to fix who we are and everything, right?
Yeah, and I think it's more about how to respond and react less and how to respond, shifting from that understanding
That pose.
and accepting when we are reactive, as you said, it's we're human beings. And but the key is to realize, to notice that, because once we are able, and I think that's practice that helps us choose, like, okay, I'm angry, I see you anger, I can feel you, welcome, but for me it's a welcome. You
Yeah.
always recognize it and really welcome it, and as I welcome it, then in general it kind of starts to already settle, like, okay, I'm here, I see you. Yeah.
It's funny. I'm thinking also of your cultures, right? So in France, anger is everywhere. Like, people get angry very easily and it's normal. It's very accepted. In the US, it's not accepted, even less from women, but it's like we hide it. But what I feel is like the French culture is so addicted to it. You is almost the same. They're two extremes, but they don't work with anger. Like, anger is normal, it will pass. You can stay 2 months angry and it's normal. So you don't process it because you get addicted to the anger. And here in this culture, it's like no anger. So you literally eat it and it eats you inside. So I was thinking, like, now you've been juggling with both cultures, and literally through Reiki we can find that middle way, right? That is the healthy way.
Yeah, I love what you say, because that's what had happened with my boyfriend at that time. I think he was feeling so uncomfortable with me being angry, and I was like,
You were just being French. Like, it
I
was normal in your culture. It was normal to be angry. Like,
it's a
yeah.
little stuff.
Like my mom, so my father is Belgian German, my mom is Spanish, and Belgium is not that much of anger. Is like, it's more like you do jokes, but my mom is about explosive anger, and it's totally normalized in my family. And I'm like, well, this is actually not normal. You can feel that anger. You're not supposed to express it, right? You're not supposed to just,
Yeah,
like, a tidal wave that destroys everybody in your wake, and then, like, I'm just, that's the way I am.
yeah,
So it's interesting how culture also, the
yeah.
precepts and our culture makes us live those precepts very differently.
Yeah, it's totally, yeah, because I think, yeah, it because it's natural,
Yeah.
right? Culture. So whenever we get angry in our culture, it's like, okay, you're angry. It's natural, and in other culture, it may be less natural because there is some kind of, fear, or you need to be in a certain way, and I think maybe that's why. I don't
And in this culture, worrying is normalized, right? In the US, worry, like in Latin America, there is not that much worry. There is probably, but you don't, expressing it is probably like expressing anger in the US. But being worried in the US is almost like I've been productive. Like, this is part of me being a caring human being. I'm worried. So
know.
it's interesting, like how, like, sometimes we should take a moment and stop. Okay, these are my precepts, this is my culture, and then reach out to people from other cultures and have a discussion about the precepts. Because, like, now talking to you, I'm like, wow, we all take this so differently, right?
Yeah, totally, totally. But it's also knowing that, you know, the how those emotions affect your
Yeah.
body. So for me, it was a big thing when I kind of realized that when I feel hijacked by my emotions, you know, my illness was coming back. So for me, it was like a way to know I need to be aware of that and see how, you know, it affects me so that I have that choice to be angry or not to be angry, right? And I think that's really key. And I know in France we are Latin, you know, especially in the south of France where I'm from. You know, it's good to have a good episode of anger. You know, it's actually we say that it strengthens relationships sometimes.
Okay. Yep. Again, we see the world differently, right? But I think what you say also then we also like when we have physical illness, we go through all these emotions like anger, worry, why me, victimization, all these things. And if the way you put it is almost, I'm not saying welcoming because but like this accept, okay, what is going on that I'm going through this without the blame? Because I think also sometimes in the healing community is like, oh, I got this chronic disease or this little disease because I'm not positive enough, which is not. We don't
Yeah,
want to take it to that extent. But it is your body is a warning signal, right, of what's happening because you're connected. And sometimes we want to be away from the body as spiritual people, but your body is literally your workstation to say some way.
yeah, it's how we feel. You know, the body is really what informs us as well about what's going on, you know, and even racing thoughts, you know, can be felt in the body. Um, so for me, it has become very important, the body, you know, to kind of feel through the body and be informed through the body. Um, Generally speaking, I love food as well. So
That makes
smells and food and tasting and, you know, um, all that is life.
Yeah, I love how in martial art they say like no body, no key. Like sometimes we want to feel this spiritual experience, but in martial art, I say, well, if you don't have a body, you cannot feel energy.
Yeah,
Right? So sometimes we put the body, and people are probably tired because I love this subject, but it's like as something less versus an equal partner. But the way you said it, literally, your body was the one who said, like, you better change and start looking for something, right? You will not have a spiritual experience if your body will not have.
yeah, yeah, exactly. The body knows, you know, that's totally true.
Like, I'm blinding you so you can start seeing.
Yeah, and also it's when you are more in touch with your body, you're more in touch with the five senses, you know, what you smell, what you touch, what you taste, what you see, what you feel, right? And then you are more awake to life, you're more in touch with life, right? You appreciate more, you know, the colors, the savors, you know, so not to be too distracted, but at the same time it's wonderful, you know, to experience life, yeah, that
I
way.
love that when you're in touch in your body, you're more in touch with life. I found that so beautiful the way you just put it so simply, right? And also, I heard that if you don't feel your body, you don't feel your emotions. Like your ability to feel your body also allows you to feel the different emotions you have. Is literally linked. So when I think again of the precepts, like anger, worry, compassion, gratitude, they sound intellectual in our culture, but they're actually very body based as well.
Yeah, yeah, be present just for today, you know, and that really leads us to be more, when you're more in touch with your body, you're more in touch with what you do, how you're engaged in life, how to be, you know. And again, it goes back to giving that choice. um,
So I wanted to, before we end this, because time is kind of flying, I wanted to also for you to share a little bit of what you offer in terms of practice right now, right? So we know you did your Reiki Masters, you were almost, let's call it led instead of forced into professional, then you teach. So now after quite few years of teaching and offering sessions, where are you at? What are some of your interests? Like, what are you doing now? And where do you want to keep on growing your practice?
Oh, I don't know. Well, I'm right now. I enjoy being at the Japanese Culture Center in Chicago. Really, really enjoy practicing there. That really has opened me to know more and understand more about the Japanese arts and ways. Love the dojo, you know, that energy there, the space that I don't know. It's just I really enjoyed it. Um, I teach mostly in person. I really like that. It's just that, again, touchy feeling. I don't know how you call it, that presence. I have a Reiki for self-care online that is offered through the Japanese Culture Center. I also teach in yoga studios in Chicago. Wherever it takes me, you know, I just go with the flow and always keep a balance between also my family life and, you know, my professional practice. Um, and yeah, that's it.
And I have to say, you also connected me to a Shin Buddhist reverend that has been teaching me Seisa meditation that I really enjoy. So I love how you also still very much into meditation practice and promoting and connecting people, for which I'm very grateful.
Yeah, thank you. Miki Nakura is a wonderful teacher. He came to Chicago, I think 2 years ago, to in person to, and yeah, highly recommend to try. Mhm.
Perfect. So any no plans for the future now? Nothing that you would like to deepen your understanding of Reiki or something that you say like, oh, that's interesting? Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's just being in life and carrying on. I don't know. I have volunteered lots with also Reiki Brigade in Chicago. I think you had Heather
Oh, yeah,
Makuchian.
yeah, Heather is wonderful. Yeah, offering Reiki to police officers and victims, and yeah,
Right, we were offering Reiki at the Chicago Police Department. You know, her work is amazing too. So there's lots of opportunities to be in the world and to, you know, to help people and to help ourselves. So,
before I ask my famous question about the oops, I would love for you to share perhaps beyond obviously the body being present, like one tip for people to deepen their Reiki practice that we may not have talked. And I
uh,
know it's a surprise question.
yeah. So one of my experience with my oops is when I was offering Reiki at the senior living facility, and there was a lady I was working with, and it was really at the beginning when I was a professional practitioner. And at some point, I was hovering my hands above the body, and she got so anxious. She opened her eyes, and poor things like, "Are you there? Are you there?" And I'm like, "Yes, I am. You know, I'm here. I'm present." And I don't hover much. You know, I'm generally like the touch, really like the touch. And so that really informed me that we have to be, and it's a teaching moment of, you know, being more in tune with who we are working with. And if it's someone who is very anxious, you know, generally I try to inform them as much as possible of how the session will be. And if they prefer having touch, then I touch through, you know, and some people really need that. So that was my oops.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much. So I have a drawing here that I made, and I made it like after we talked on the pre-interview. And I usually
That's,
use a lot of color, but in this case I did.
yeah, thank you. I really appreciate. Oh my gosh.
And
Yeah,
I'll be sending that to you through the mail. I'll probably hit you up for the address.
the colors of life, the colors of everyone, right? And I really appreciate it's beautiful. And my
Thank you. Yeah, as usual, there's also gold and silver for non-duality, the moon and the sun from the master symbol. And it's weird because every drawing is very different. And sometimes like color, I'm not always cold, but that was like that heart opening with all that, like, I don't know, it felt like very joyful, it felt like it needed color.
very life affirming. It's colorful. It's beautiful. Thank you so much, Natalie.
You're welcome. And I have one more question. sorry, but it came to me because a lot of people go into professional practice because they want, right? And they have a business plan or how much you were kind of forced. How was that transition from not charging to charging? And perhaps one piece of advice for someone who's starting to charge for the Reiki session or forced to suddenly do professional when they were not expecting. I should
Yeah.
take the force out. Led to be professional, if that's okay. If you want to share that experience.
Yeah, that was a big thing for me to charge for practice. But at the same time, understanding that when we are professional practitioner, we do have some cost, associated with space, associated with um, material that we need. So it's important to cover that cost and then to see what's appropriate, compared to what is practiced in around you, and also keep maybe sometimes sliding scales depending on everyone need. My professional practice balances volunteer work with professional work, and I'm always mindful of that pricing level, because I really care about making this practice accessible, service accessible. And it depends on you know on where we are in life and what we feel comfortable with. Yeah, it's a tricky one.
Yeah, and New York has gone a little bit crazy in terms of prices. I've seen Reiki session for 300 an hour. And my concern is that, like, I'm sure some people can afford that, but my concern is like Reiki is supposed to be gentle over time. Is like, but again, living in New York City as well, as you said, has cost. So it's I think also like some cities will have a crazier cost than others. But as much as we can, I love what you say also, can we also like perhaps charge what we need to charge to make a living? And can we donate perhaps community centers or places that helps people who can't afford? And usually those are the people who also can't afford healthcare, right? So
Yeah,
that's a lovely way to balance perhaps that and that advice of like, okay, you may have to charge 300 in New York, but can you donate a couple of hours to help as well? I love that.
that firm and flexibility, I think it's important. Yeah.
That's great advice. Thank you so much, Veronique. I've like we've crossed paths here and there, but like I'm so happy we got to actually know to each other formally well, a little better than before. And thank you for sharing so much beautiful wisdom on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Natalie. Really appreciate being here. Thank you for all your work. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. And as usual, I'll leave all the contact information for Veronique on the notes of the podcast so you can reach out to her either for shingles or for any Reiki related query that you may have if you live in Chicago, or the online classes for the Japanese Society. Thank you.